This is Sony's first drone and it's called Airpeak. Now this drone is so different than a lot of the other drones that are available on the market, and in this video I want to explore the difference between the DJI Mavic 3 and the Sony Airpeak, and I'll explain the differences between both of these drones and what makes the Airpeak so unique and so different. So I got the opportunity to meet up with Craig, who's an experienced drone pilot, and he's been working with Sony on Airpeak since the beginning. So he's able to give us a lot more insight into this drone, and he's also gave me a lot of information that really shows what this drone is capable of and where this drone excels at.
So my name's Craig Coker. I'm a professional drone pilot. I've been in the space for about 10 years now. We got Airpeak here, and now I'm really just working with Sony to tune their machine and also share my experiences with Airpeak. So it's really exciting.
So this is Sony's first drone, and I have to say that they really knocked it out of the park for being the first of a product that a company is producing. A lot of times the first generation just isn't that good, but what I've seen is that this is a very thought out product, and they know exactly who this product is geared towards.
The point of this aircraft is to get that really high quality video, especially with the 85mm. That shallow focus and the continuous autofocus with alpha cameras is just amazing. And I think that's really going to be a highlight for a lot of content creators.
There's a lot of features that really cater to the professional level pilot, but there's also features that cater to the solo creator, and it makes it a much more accessible drone. So let's go through 10 different features and compare these drones side by side. So number 10 is the size and weight. So Sony Airpeak is what's considered a heavy lift drone.
The payloads itself has a separate gimbal stabilization unit, and also the camera is a little bit bigger, whereas you see something like the Mavic, which is single operator, has a fixed camera on there.
So it can carry cameras like the FX3, the A7S Mark III, which I'm shooting on right now, something like the A1 or the A7 Mark IV, and it can handle bigger lenses up to the G Master 1.2s.
There's typically bigger heavy lifts out there. There's octocopters, which is essentially 8 rotors. You know, this is a quadcopter, so it's taking the compactness from a smaller drone but making it a heavy lift.
So you can have a heavy lens and camera combo on this drone, and you can swap it out. Now the DJI Mavic 3 has a fixed camera, and you have 2 lenses on the DJI Mavic 3. You have the wide lens, which is equivalent to a 24mm, and it has an aperture of a 2.8 to f11. And then you have the zoomed in lens, which is a 7x zoom, which is something like 160mm. It's crazy, but the image quality on that lens isn't very good. Now on the Sony Airpeak, well, you can add any lens combo. So just to do a side-by-side comparison to see these two drones in action, let's look at the Mavic 3 with the 24mm lens, and let's look at the Sony Airpeak with a 24mm lens on the Sony FX3. Now number 9 is the swappable gimbal. So the Sony Airpeak has the ability to take the gimbal off and swap it out with another gimbal.
So the hot swap capability in payloads is very special for people that do high-end productions, where they can take 2 different payloads, 2 different camera lens combinations, quickly swap that out.
Now the DJI Mavic 3 has fixed camera, fixed gimbal. It's an all-in-one package. It makes it super simple. But the benefit of the Sony Airpeak is you could have different cameras for different situations.
You can have a FX3 for low light capability and then jump into photos and run an A7R4 or even the flagship A1.
Now, what you could also do with the Sony Airpeak is have the gimbal pre-balanced before you get to a location. You just pop it on, you put in the batteries, and you're good to start flying. Now, number 8 is the size. So DJI Mavic 3, super small. Like, this could fit in your backpack, take with you anywhere. Batteries are small. With the Sony Airpeak, it's definitely larger. It's a heavy lift drone. It's pretty big. If you look at these two side by side, yeah, it's a massive difference between these drones.
So you do have a lot more components involved, and with that, getting your shots done to packing up, and you have more cases and stuff that you have to deal with. But again, it's kind of like the trade-off. You're getting incredible footage out of something versus having a small little drone, which easily deployable, but doesn't necessarily get you that quality.
But the Sony Airpeak is still small enough that you could put it on a backpack. When we came up here to fly today, well, we just threw it on Craig's backpack and he was able to hike up here no problem. And it wasn't even a backpack that's designed for the Airpeak. We just kind of modified the backpack he was using. All right, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is the flight time. And that's one of the biggest criticisms that I've seen about this drone, because the Sony Airpeak has a 10-minute flight time. The DJI Mavic 3 has something like 47-minute flight time, which realistically, I've been getting like 30 minutes of flight time when I'm actually out flying it. But still, it's a massive difference. Having 30 minutes in the air is huge, and also the batteries are smaller.
You know, a payload like this, all up weight is about 14.5 pounds, and you roughly get around 10 minutes with that. Certainly matters what type of flight you're doing, the environment that you're in and everything. If you start getting into like 85mm GM lens, that's about a pound heavier. So with the weight goes a lower flight time.
So you could carry 3 DJI batteries with you in a small form factor, whereas the Sony Airpeak, it's a 10-minute flight time, which means you need to have more batteries, but also the batteries are big and you need 2 of them to be able to operate the drone. So this is one thing where, yeah, it's gonna take a lot more battery power to lift this drone, and it chews through battery much faster. But Sony does have a solution to this low battery time, and that is the hot swap capabilities.
You can land, swap out the batteries because it's a redundant system, and be back up in the air within 10-15 seconds.
That way you don't have to power down the drone before you power it back up and take off into the sky. And Craig showed me a little demonstration of this up here, and it's fast. So in a lot of situations, 10 minutes, yeah, it seems like it's not a lot of time, but with this hot swap capability, it does make it much easier to use. And you just need to have batteries on hand ready to go and just keep swapping them in and out. And that's one thing that's gonna affect the portability, is you're just gonna have to carry a lot of batteries, which it is a lot more weight. Now, number 6, let's talk about tuning these drones, because both of them give you options to change how the drone moves in the air, but the Airpeak definitely gives you more options.
The gimbal has a lot of options to tune, which is really important, and there's also a PC application to visually look at what the gimbal is doing so that you can tune those motors to specific payloads.
So with a DJI drone, you have sport mode, you have normal mode, you have cine mode, and it's like slow, medium, fast. And you could even dial those in even more to your liking. But with the Sony Airpeak, you actually have access to more controls and fine tuning. One thing that was really interesting that Craig was explaining to me is that you can set what happens when you let go of the controller. So on a DJI drone, when you let go of the controller, the drone's just gonna come to a stop, and it's pretty jarring sometimes. Whereas with the Airpeak, you can feather those movements. So if you let go of the controls, instead of just going right to a stop, it will slow down gradually until it gets to the point where it's fully stopped. And that's much better for cinematic looking footage because you don't have any jarring motion. Now, number 5 is the lens and camera options. So DJI Mavic 3, you have a fixed camera, fixed lenses, and the only thing that you can do is zoom in on your footage. If you're shooting on that 24mm lens, well, you can zoom in 2 times, but it's a digital crop, so it ends up not looking that good. Sony Airpeak gives you the complete creative control to add any lens that you want and any camera. So if you want the Sony a7S Mark III with a 20mm, which is what I'm shooting on right now, you could use this combo, but then swap it out for like an 85mm or a 50mm, and you never have to lose quality of footage. And then you could swap it out for the Sony A1 and get some 8K footage, or swap it out to the Sony a7R Mark IV and get some super high-res photos.
What the system allows you to do is also utilize a FPV. You're essentially able to look on the flight app with your FPV and get close dialed in shots because you can see the surroundings really well with that wide view, and you can run like 85mm on the camera, and it allows you to see what the camera is looking at with that narrow focal length. So it really allows you adjustability as a single operator.
And that's where this drone really excels above the DJI Mavic 3, because you really only have one quality lens to work with on the 3. So number 4, let's look at the 2 controllers. The DJI Mavic 3 is definitely smaller, it's more portable. The Sony Airpeak is a bigger controller, but when you look at the button configurations, they're very similar. If you're used to flying DJI drones and you jump onto the Sony Airpeak, the controller feels very close. And there are a few more buttons. There's customizable buttons.
You can also map these buttons to your preference, which is important. So I can basically even make a rack focus, a manual rack focus, by using a combination of one button and using the lever that is usually like a tilt. And I could create that slow rack focus, the manual. So that's really cool. It looks so simple, but it's very technical. That is really important to have, especially for all the advanced photographers and filmers. They're needing a lot of that functionality at their fingertips.
Now, number 3 is the actual experience on the iPad. So when I was playing around with the Sony Airpeak and looking at all the options, it does feel very similar to how the DJI screen works. Now, buttons aren't the same, but it does have the same look and feel. And so when you're going from one to the other, it's not a massive transition.
The transition between flying those platforms and something like Airpeak is actually pretty easy and seamless. I found that within my second flight, I was flying it just like Inspire 2. That's what really matters to me, because if you have something that is tough to learn and takes some time, that also means time is money, right?
You could pick up the Sony Airpeak, the controller feels similar, the app feels similar, and so it's not a huge learning curve.
A lot of the buttons are really easy to use and navigate around. Won't really get too confused with where they're at. It just seems natural where they're at. And I think that that's important. That helps the transition from one platform to the other.
Number 2, let's talk about obstacle avoidance. So both of these drones are actually omnidirectional, meaning that you can fly into something in any direction and the drone's gonna stop. And I think that's a huge advantage for both of these drones over a lot of drones on the market, because omnidirectional sensing just makes it a lot more comforting when you're flying.
Just the other day I was at the beach, there was a cliff right there, and I was paying attention to a surfer, and I come close to the wall and it notifies me through the flight app and also through the aircraft itself. Whereas if I didn't have that, I'd probably be right into that wall. So those are really important features to have. It kind of acts as a second observer, and that's really important with a high-end drone like this, where you've spilled a lot of investment in.
And number 1 is that the Sony Airpeak was designed for high-end production. The way it works with the legs that fold up and the 360 camera allows you to have 2 operators. You can have one operator flying the drone and another operator controlling the camera, meaning that your camera can rotate in full 360.
So when you're folding those legs out, it's really important to have a feature like that in dual operation, so that the pilot can go one direction and the camera operator can essentially view anything in a 360 space. And that's really important to get those really close dynamic shots. You know, example is getting really close to a car and the pilot can really focus on that flight, because that's really important. Whereas the camera operator can focus on the frame. You can get those really tight shots, especially with the 85mm.
The DJI Mavic 3 just doesn't have the capabilities to do that, because the camera is always facing forwards. And it's really hard to fly one operator to do these really precision shots. And so where Airpeak fits in the whole ecosystem of drones is that it's definitely geared towards professional use and high-end production. But because of the design and how easy it is to use, a person can run as a solo operator and be able to use the Airpeak.
The point of this aircraft is to get that really high quality video. With the Alpha series tied into Airpeak, it is something that I haven't really seen in the drone industry, especially with the 85mm. That shallow focus and the continuous autofocus with Alpha cameras is just amazing. And I think that's really going to be a highlight for a lot of content creators.
Just playing around with it today and flying around here in these hills, it gave me some ideas of how you could use this drone to get some pretty epic footage. And it's not going to be used in every scenario, but how I see these two drones working together is when you need a drone that can shoot a 50mm, an 85mm, and have high-end quality, and you also have a little bit more time and you can carry a little extra weight, well, that's where the Sony Airpeak comes in. And the DJI Mavic 3 is like the perfect drone just to have on you all the time, so that if you are climbing to the top of a mountain, it's not that big of a deal to just throw the drone in and you're still going to be able to get some epic looking footage. So I want to say a special thanks to Craig and Sony for allowing me to see this drone in person and be able to get some hands-on experience with it. And next, I highly suggest you check out this video right here. It goes through a ton of different drone moves that you can use in your videos. I'll see you on the next video.